Clients are also looking for more diversity within their teams and diversity of thought when it comes to how they're approaching their constituents and the kinds of programming that they're looking for from agency representatives.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella-Williamson.
Hello, and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella-Williamson. This season, our focus is on practicing social responsibility. Today, I'm joined by Christina Stokes. Christina Stokes is the Senior Vice President, Director of Talent Acquisition at RUBENSTEIN, a New York City-based strategic communications and reputation management firm. Christina is a member of the Public Relations Society of America, and she's a contributor to the monthly PRSA Strategies and Tactics newspaper with her column, Hire and Seek. She has extensive expertise developing and implementing high-level talent acquisition strategies, and she is passionate about refining and enhancing employee engagement, company culture, and diversity and inclusion efforts. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm grateful to have you join me. I've enjoyed reading your column for years now, and I'm excited to get you into this discussion. So tell us a little bit more about your background and your role today.
Sure. So like you mentioned already, I currently work with RUBENSTEIN, and I've been able to do a lot of really exciting things with the firm in just over 4 years, including being founding member and co-chair of our inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. That's been really exciting, and we've been rolling out programming to staff since January when we were able to roll out virtually, which I'm actually surprised we were able to do in the first place, all things considered, but onward and upward, right?
Absolutely.
I guess one other new thing that's going on currently is I just joined the PRSA Tri-State District as a board member, and that happened last month.
Wow, that's really interesting. I know you and I spoke before this episode, and you corrected me and said, I've been more on the human resources side versus PR.
That's right. So I've been working in talent acquisition in the PR and communication space for most of my career. And I really love it. I like being with an agency, but being able to recruit talent to work with one organization as opposed to being a headhunter on the outside where you have relationships with companies and you place talent, but you don't really get to witness them grow within a company firsthand.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of how we have that kind of parallel career and strong relationships with our journalist friends here in PR. They're our allies. We do things together. Sometimes I say, we're the peanut butter to their jelly or vice versa. And I would imagine from your seat being so close to those in public relations and communication, it's that same kind of relationship where you know a lot about the industry and maybe don't practice within it, but really do shape it from your seat. That's exciting.
Right, exactly. And I'm just glad to be able to have my hands so deep in a lot of different circles in the PR space right now.
Well, wonderful. So much has really changed since we were all impacted by the global pandemic. So what aspects of what you do has been impacted by that and what you practice there at the agency?
Sure. So the way we're structured at RUBENSTEIN, I'm on a small human resources team of 5 people, and we all have very unique functions. So I'm the person who leads the talent acquisition strategy for the firm. And I'm the only one doing that role, although I am supported by my team and others across the firm, when necessary to pull them into the process. But I think the COVID-19 pandemic really changed everything that I do in terms of transitioning to a fully virtual interviewing system and turning the entire strategy into something that's virtual as well. There was a period of time in the first few months there in 2020 where we weren't hiring at RUBENSTEIN, and we took a pause to really focus on our existing staff and client development. So I was able to really continue networking and just kind of dig in with people within the industry, maybe that I hadn't spoken to in a while, which really ended up being a smart thing to do, because when we kicked off hiring again last fall, I already had relationships that had been refreshed over the past few months, which I think was really helpful for everybody. I'm now leading our staff and our executives through a fully virtual interviewing system. And we're also onboarding people remotely, which is something that we've never had to do in the past either.
Yeah, I love what you mentioned there with that term refreshed. I think that's a great way to describe some of the opportunities we had here is to kind of reset, reconnect with some professionals and places in our network that we have maybe not nurtured as well as we should have. I was watching a film yesterday, actually on HBO Max called Lockdown. And she's a high-level executive in the film. And she was talking about how really so many people have been locked down in their professions or their day-to-day. And so refreshing or resetting things seems like an opportune way to approach what has been happening. So with those looking for a job, I know there was a lot of conversation at the top of the pandemic and kind of midway about looking for a job. What about now? What is it like to look for a job in communication or PR right now?
I think in March of 2020, we were definitely in a space where there just weren't jobs. Everyone was laying off. News outlets were closing down. Agencies were cutting staff, losing clients. My firm stayed in a really solid position throughout. So I think we were one of the lucky ones in that regard. Just good business, kept us afloat. But right now, things are super different than they were a year ago. Even 6 months ago, there are so many jobs available, and it's really a candidate's market. So anyone looking for a job in PR and other industries probably has a plethora of opportunities they can look at right now, which is very different than what it was like, at this time last year.
Yeah, and I think there's also been a renaissance and thought process that's changed about what kind of jobs are available right now. What do we love to do? And what are the environments that best suit us? Because some people had that opportunity to work remotely where they hadn't before. I had to start my own business for me to be able to have that experience and work full time in my side of town away from clients. It was just really a suburb city proximity issue back in 2015. So a lot has changed.
Yeah. And also I would kind of piggyback off of that if I can. I think in an agency setting or in any kind of company, I've noticed that you really kind of have gotten this interesting window into the lives of your colleagues. It's not uncommon to see someone's pet or someone's child pass by in the background or jump on your lap. And I feel like it's humanized us in some ways that we didn't have when we were all in person before.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I've seen a lot more behind the scenes, and I think that's great because then you really understand the perspective the other is coming from, and you can work with them a little bit better in a deeper way too. So beyond the humanizing, what other new trends do you see emerging now that things have shifted so much? And what might be coming around the bend as we start re-entering the workplace?
Well, I think just the job market is very different, but I've seen organizations, including my own currently, where technology and the use of it in different ways for interviewing and for work has just expanded. People who were resistant to leveraging different kinds of tech, video calls, all that, it's just commonplace for us now. And I think because of that, it's never going to go away again. So people have been able to digitize everything that they do in their work. And for me on the recruiting side and working with my team in HR and, the executives at the firm as well, we've been able to digitize everything. So tech and how we use it has really just changed. Previously also, we used to host regular site visits and tours at our agency in person from different universities and organizations, but we've been doing that virtually and it's been really successful. And that's actually been a huge benefit in the diversity arena as well. Not every student is close to the New York City metropolitan area. And now being able to have a virtual roundtable with executives in PR and practicing professionals, if you're in a school on the other side of the country, it's not a problem. And people are so much more comfortable with that now. So I think that part's been great about that transition to tech. And the processes have become almost entirely paperless now. So anything like interviewing, onboarding, all of that becomes easier almost without having to go through everything in more of a written and a paper way. I think that's been really helpful. It makes things more seamless. And you mentioned before, just working from home. I think workplace flexibility is a huge thing to point out. The worst of everything is definitely behind us, and my firm and many others have either already started to transition back into the office or they're going to in the fall. A lot of companies, mine included, are waiting for school to open again. That's more easy for families to make arrangements. But I think that flexibility is here for the long haul too. Many organizations are having hybrid models of how, when you'll be on site or when you'll be working remotely and what the opportunities are in that way. So we look at that in the interview process now too. So that's another thing that's changed. Also, probably another thing I would mention is that communication seems to have improved a lot from organizations. They're much more, not even just in the PR industry, but I've noticed companies are just a lot more human, a lot more approachable, a lot more active on social media. And a lot of that is because we haven't seen them. So it's kind of like I said before, you get a window into your coworker's life. You've kind of been seeing that from companies and agencies too. And I really like that humanization factor that's come up a lot. And I've noticed that across the board.
Yeah, I agree with so many of your points there. I love that you are reaching out and able to show your agency to college students so that they get an idea of your world and what it takes to become a part of that, because that proximity factor can be a huge barrier and challenge, particularly with students with diverse backgrounds. I know that I was talking to a colleague earlier, and we were just talking about the national conferences. And this fall, you see a lot more reemerging. And the truth of the matter is, I had always had to really decide and think about when I went to a conference. Not that anyone doesn't, but in my case, I've really only made one national conference in my recent years because of the hard choices I had to make. But with this opportunity to be a part of the virtual or hybrid factors of that, it's really opened a lot of accessible doors. So kudos to you all for doing that. And I hope you'll continue that, because that is very inspiring to others. And you never know who you'll meet, right, from the talent side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the idea of a more hybrid society, a more flexible work style is great. That sounds like it should be retained from what we've learned through this process. But is there any other processes you put in place that you want to retain, or maybe some of them you're looking forward to letting go of?
Honestly, I really look forward to keeping the majority of the interview process as virtual as possible, maybe until the very end when making final decisions. Being able to interview people remotely and to set conversations up with many staffers virtually has made things so much easier. And now you can really have a conversation with anyone and see their face anywhere, anytime. You don't have to take a full day off of work to interview for a job. And as you and many people know, interviewing for a job is a full-time job. So you can have a conversation during your lunch break and go right back to work. I think it makes it so much easier and, like you said, more accessible for everybody, either the people interviewing and the people conducting the interviews. It's just more seamless. So I really hope that we can hold on to a lot of that. And I hope the hybrid model is something that sticks around too. I think it opens up an organization for more creativity, more diversity of staff, of clients. I think the concept of just being on site 24/7 is really a thing of the past. So I hope that we can take the things that really worked for us during this time and apply that going forward. RUBENSTEIN is going to be coming back in a hybrid model as well, and we're going to try that out for a bit.
I love all that. And you're right about the virtual interviews. One part that I think is very helpful, I know when I interview, for example, college students right now for either internships, we have an apprenticeship model, and also we're doing private sector work study, which was a new silver lining of the pandemic for a lot of college students, is now that they can be work studies off campus for private sector for-profit companies, and they can learn about agency life, right? But the virtual interview experience is quite different, and it's important to actually see how a candidate may interact on Zoom or online in one of those channels, because that tells you a lot about them as well. And that's on top of course, not disrupting their whole day or half a day and making that process more stressful for everyone. So I love that.
Right, of course. And I think, you can still represent yourself appropriately, professionally, and you can still be authentic, even if you're on video, even if you're on the phone. It's just another way of getting to know somebody. And I think if you're comfortable in your own shoes and you can just become comfortable on video, the interview flows more naturally and people get a feel for what you'll be like when you are in person together.
Excellent points. So much has changed in how we're conducting the work. And now with employment opportunities expanding, what about PR pros? Have you seen a change in how PR or communication professionals are really approaching work?
I have in a number of ways. We mentioned earlier how, people have taken this time to refresh, reevaluate what's important to them, the kind of work they want to do. There are a lot of articles coming out right now across industries, including the PR space, how people are leaving companies and going to others and really looking for what's best for them, professionally, personally, for their career. So in the PR industry, especially, we're seeing a lot of that right now. Maybe the agency space isn't for you and you want to go in-house or vice versa. I'm also seeing a lot of people leaving the media side to come into the PR space. So maybe they've worked in the broadcast side or they're a journalist now. That's always been a pretty natural transition for people in PR. I'm seeing way more of it now. And I have a lot of people that are reporters or that have worked on the media side trying to make that transition now too. So I think people across the board are just looking for what's going to be exciting for them and what might make more sense for them. And PR pros definitely, they've had to shift a lot too. Everything that they've done for their clients, they've had to revisit how they're doing the work, how they're meeting with their clients and keeping them posted. Are they Zooming? Are they on calls? Is it with the whole team? Is it one-on-one? And I think for every client, you really have to be able to look at that from a unique lens. Not everybody's different, just like your coworkers. Not everyone's cut from the same cloth. Everyone is unique. They have their own needs. And I think a lot of people in the PR side, on the agency side especially, they've had to shift gears big time. And I think the same goes for how they're looking for their next opportunities too.
Yeah, a lot of evaluation across all the aisles. I would even add to that on the PR side, I've seen a lot of us pros talk more about how much crisis communications and issues management work we've had to do over these last 16, 17, I don't even know how many months now. And I'm forecasting there's still many more bumps ahead because people have been under an enormous amount of pressure for a sustained period of time. So you have more people problems, right?
Right.
A little more mistakes online or HR issues that pop up. And that can create different challenges. So from the PR side, I think some are evaluating how much of this type of work is going to continue and can I keep up with it? And or how do I take care of myself to be able to sustain my place in the field while the people issues or some of the disruptions start hopefully settling down. So that's what I've seen too.
And clients are also looking for more diversity within their teams and diversity of thought when it comes to how they're approaching their constituents and the kinds of programming that they're looking for from agency representatives. And a lot of that is due to what happened last summer, all the protests globally and everything. A lot of conversations have really come to the forefront that were always an afterthought for organizations and companies, but it's right there in front of your face now. So I think that's just a different way that work has changed as well. When you're developing a strategy for a client, all these other factors are critical now too.
That's a good point. There's so much evaluation to be done from here on out. From before, it should have been happening in the best organizations. It definitely was. But you're right. There's so many factors we're now weighing for every opportunity on both sides, the employer-employee. So what about from your seat and vantage point? What are the unique challenges you're facing for talent acquisition?
Over the past 16 months or however long it's been now, I've really been trying to keep my relationships current. I've really been trying to get to know the people I'm interviewing. I've been trying to keep stronger relationships with new staff that we've been onboarding virtually that have never stepped foot in our offices, that have never met any of us in person most of the time, in many cases at least. And that's a challenge for sure. Not everybody works really well in that way, but we've been pretty lucky to just be able to correspond with a lot of PR folks that they know what they're doing in this space, the way things are. Going forward, I really have to continue to evolve the talent acquisition strategy for Rubenstein. I think being very involved with the PRSA and the Society for Human Resources Management and all kinds of other organizations, I think that's been really helpful just to stay current on what's happening in the space outside of our agency and evolving with that. Because once we start to transition back to on-site, the way we've been doing things for the past year and change will have to shift again. So being open to that and being nimble, that's really what I've had to do, what my team has had to do this whole time and will continue to have to do.
Absolutely. I said some of us have been pivoting so much, we're just like ballerinas now, and we can just turn around quickly like no one's business. So that's absolutely right. You mentioned onboarding and the challenge remote workers can have when they're trying to learn a corporate culture or an organizational culture and they're not in person. What kind of things have you all done to make that transition smoother in an all virtual space?
Right. I mentioned earlier that we've been able to increase communication and transparency. There's been a newsletter that we send around to staff now pretty regularly that talks about what's happening in the business, but also what's happening with people at home, which I think has been really nice because, again, you want to humanize people, and sometimes it's very easy to feel isolated if you're only connecting on the phone or on Zoom, and it's not all the time. For someone just starting with a company, you can't just get up from your desk and pop into someone's office to ask a question, to ask for help. Even for the smallest thing that you might want to know, want clarity on, want to be trained on, you have to set up a meeting for everything. So you lose that organic ability to develop a relationship. So that's definitely been tough for the people who have had to onboard virtually. I know that. So what we try to do is get people to start on the same day so that they have a buddy kind of already built in. We try to get people to participate in training sessions together. So that's another way to communicate with each other, in addition to what the individual teams are doing, having multiple meetings a week with their groups, one-on-ones. So you have to put more effort in to develop those relationships, to get someone up to speed, providing intentional opportunity for people to learn and get to know each other. It's very important to do that right now so that people don't feel lost in transition. And so they can get to know people and learn the culture too.
You're right. I think being intentional has been a big, big part of this whole experience, is an opportunity to be more thoughtful and purposeful in what we do. And does this matter? Does this not? Are we meeting just to meet, or is this a real work session we can get value out of? And I love your buddy system. That's been a great tool since kindergarten, right? Like, you two are buddies, watch out for each other, make sure nobody falls off, the track. And I think that's really important when you're onboarding a new team. And I love that idea of building that cohort and being thoughtful about it. So thank you for sharing those tips, because that'll help us be more intentional in what we do. Because I don't want us to lose, we get back into these workplaces and then people get comfortable again. And I want us to be more comfortable with the idea of focusing on what really is helpful to the individual employees, because one of the big topics I'm seeing is employee retention is an issue. People have had that time to think, or maybe save money, or, check their own purpose and move on for jobs or retire early. Mm-hmm. And so it's a hot topic. Have you noticed any new trends in employee retention from your perspective?
Definitely. We've had some transition this year, not so much last year. I feel like if people had a good, stable job, they were going to stay there because organizations were just going through so many changes. But this year we've seen some more movement, but we've also been able to tap into people that we were not able to access a year plus ago, who were looking for the next best thing. And Rubenstein is that for them, which is great. So I think organizations, we're all seeing movement right now, though, both in hiring and opening up a lot of positions as more opportunities become available, as client work continues to pick up, which is a great thing, of course, if you're working in the agency arena, for sure. There's a magazine that comes out to the HR industry, and the newest cover of this magazine, it's the HR magazine. They released a new issue that I got in the mail the other day, and I was laughing because it was just literally a surfboard, the tidal wave of people leaving organizations and that kind of thing. That's really what it was all about. So it's across industries. It's certainly not just in PR. Everyone everywhere is looking for what makes the most sense for them, for their families, for their career. So I've seen a lot of it. And I think if we want to retain talent, we have to shift with the times. We have to embrace technology. We have to embrace hybrid work styles. We need to provide flexibility where we didn't before, but give people the tools they need to be successful even without that. And we need to over communicate. Instead of disappearing back into our home office holes, we need to definitely be, just like we said before, purposeful, interact, and be open to shifting with the times. There's no way you can be successful if you do what you did before the pandemic. That will not work for anybody.
Absolutely not. And the opportunity to get talent from around the globe in this new environment is just growing and expanding, like you said before. So I hope we all retain that as we move forward.
For sure.
Christina, I love to ask my guests this question because the answers are always so different, but I think they are purposeful. What does smart talk mean to you?
It's a good question. I feel like you're the best one to answer it. But if I had to, that would make no sense. But if I had to say something about that smart talk, I feel like that's, when you talk to your kid, right? I have a little girl. She just turned 6 years old, and she's always talking back to me. So I would say to her, stop being smart, stop being so wise for your age, right? But in this case, I think it's more along the lines of talking straight, just being straight up about what you have to say, having smart and necessary conversations. And that's probably where it would fall for me.
Yeah, maybe that's what our kids are doing. You made me think of the phrase "smart aleck," right?
Exactly.
Smart aleck, and like, what are we really saying with that?
Well, I think we just don't want them to be too big for their britches too quickly, but they should have smart, hard conversations. We all should.
There you go. I love that honesty. Well, we're going to pick that up from our kids. I'm with you on that. Well, this has been a very fun conversation and really helpful as we're thinking about the career aspect and the parts we can play to be more socially responsible as we're hiring and leveraging our talent and really supporting their growth. What is the best way for our listeners to connect with you after this?
Sure. So I am most active on LinkedIn under Christina Stokes. You can find me right away wearing my consciously unbiased t-shirt in my profile photo. I'm also very active on Twitter. New York Roses is my Twitter account. I have an Instagram. Feel free to follow me there too, NYC Roses. Or just contact me at cstokes@rubenstein.com.
Great. Thank you, Christina, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much. It was really great talking to you. I enjoyed myself.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We're creating this podcast with you in mind. Help us reach more pros by sharing episodes you've learned from on social. Leave us a rating or review to share what's valuable to you, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Visit prgearshop.com to check out our fall collection. Use promo code SMARTTALK to get 10% off. That's prgearshop.com. Use our listener promo code SMARTTALK. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit MVW360.com. That's MVW360.com.